Now, all right, guys, there's rumors that have been going around about Starlink on the African continent. And of course, we know that Starlink is Elon Musk's company, which is providing internet services to all the world. Now, Starlink has been expanding in many countries on the African continent. We have seen it in South Africa, we have seen it in Kenya, we have seen it in Nigeria, we have seen it in Botswana, and there was also some controversy surrounding Starlink's entry into Zimbabwe about its licenses. And also, we are seeing that Starlink has recently launched operations in Ghana. It was given a license, as you are currently seeing. Now, the question we are asking is Starlink really a force for good when it comes to the African continent, or is it a force for colonization? We have seen, Elon Musk, the owner of this company, of course, is the owner also of SpaceX and the owner of Tesla Automobiles, which is an electric car, company. Elon Musk also owns X, which is formerly Twitter. Now, Elon Musk as a person is a controversial figure also, who of course claims to be a free speech absolutionist. Now, on the other hand, this is somebody who abhors sentiments of imperialism. As you remember, that Elon Musk came out to say that they will coup whoever they want as long as it has to do with the resources which are required to help Tesla to advance its objectives of manufacturing electric vehicle. And of course, this had to do with Bolivia. Now we ask again, is this somebody worth supporting? And looking at the background of this person, of course, we know that he came from South Africa, was born in South Africa, but his actions do not paint anything that he's doing anything to benefit where he came from, which is South Africa. He is operating to benefit the United States and also, for that matter, white supremacists or the white race. This is what we have been seeing from all his actions. He's talking about colonizing Mars, of course, which all are questionable in certain corners. But the question for today here is this Starlink going to be beneficial to the African continent? And of course, different individuals would come out to say that, okay, I'm going to have faster internet and I'm going to be more productive in different areas, of my business. And of course, it will help the continent in turn. But remember, you're also going to be paying subscriptions to people like Elon Musk, who are establishing themselves as almost a monopoly, because it's very few people who can go to space. And if you look at the continent of Africa itself, we have never gone to space. None of the African countries have ever gone to space. So to me, this looks like colonialism 2.0, or neo-colonialism that is happening right now. The question that we should be asking as Africans: where are our internet companies? These are the questions which we should be asking today. That why don't we have our own internet companies? Why don't we have our own Googles? Why don't we celebrate our own companies? And where are they? Of course, they are non-existent. We cannot celebrate them because they are non-existent. So that is why, as Africans, then we should ask ourselves serious questions. Why don't we establish these companies which belong to us as Africans? And if there is anyone who has stood in the way of us establishing those companies, that is the person that we should remove. If there's anyone who does not have a vision of industrializing the African continent, these are the people we should be removing. And of course, that includes the heads of state. The heads of state, if they have stood in the way of Africa industrializing or talking about piecemeal improvements and incremental improvements on the African continent, and they are not talking about radical transformation of the African continent, whereby we should have our own Google, we should have our own Facebook, we should have our own WhatsApp. China has these. Why is it that Africans, we do not have it? We should have our own Tesla. We should have, China has them, has more than 10 Teslas, more than 100 Teslas in its country. It has its own Amazon and Alibaba. Where are our own Alibabas as Africans? Jumia is not our own. It belongs to Irish people. It belongs to white people. But because it claims to be African, it claims to look like African, then of course many people think that Jumia is an African platform. So the question we should be asking in this is where are our fiber optic companies as Africans? Have we established that? Now, if we have not been able to establish these companies, then you should ask the question, when is this supposed to be happening, and when should we establish these companies? And of course, the question then of unified Africa comes, into play at this particular moment. Recently, when President Museveni was speaking in Kenya at the launching of President, candidate Raila Odinga, who's been a major opposition candidate in Kenyan politics, his bid for the African Union Commission chairperson, President Museveni mentioned that the various African countries cannot go to space, cannot put up a space program because they do not have that money. And of course, this is where, Nkrumah's dream of a unified Africa comes in. Of course, many people would say, should I wait for a unified Africa for me to have internet? Of course, you should not, but you should be advocating. You should be working together with us in advocating for that unified Africa. And that is the most important question that you'll be asking. When should we be able to do this? What can I contribute towards bringing this unified Africa that will be able to take satellites to space? We have been in independence for the last 60 years. If our heads of state cannot give us internet of our own, if we cannot have our own Tesla, if we cannot have our own Starink, if we cannot have our own Alibaba, if we cannot have our own Google, if we cannot have our own high-speed trains, if we cannot have our own Boeing, or we cannot have our own Airbus, we cannot have our own Toyota, we cannot have our own companies, then these are not the right leaders to be leading the African continent. And we need to do something about it. Somebody has got to do something about it. And that has to be done by the next generation. I have so much hope in the next generation of Africans. So we are putting all the hopes, the whole continent is putting all its hopes in the next generation of African leaders, and that means the young people. So we have to take that responsibility of making Africa great. And that starts with us advocating or fighting to remove the current heads of state so that we can unify the continent and establish integrated infrastructure on the African continent, starting with an integrated rail platform all across the African continent. Number two, building a unified fiber optic cable all across the African continent, which passes through almost all the African countries, which exist on the continent. Number three, establishing enough energy and building enough energy platforms on the African continent, whereby at least 90% of our people on the African continent should have access to electricity. And number four, of course, it comes to the importance of food. Growing our own food as Africans. This is very important. These are the very important aspects of any civilization, and a country should be in control of all these resources, all these sectors of the economy, for it to grow, for it to be counted as a sovereign state, as a standalone state, which can be able to invent and innovate in a lot of technologies. But what do you think? What do you think? This is my thinking. I think that Tesla, while it's going to provide, Starlink, while it is going to provide these services of internet, but we should be asking the real questions. Is this going to be beneficial? Is it going to be beneficial, or is an exploitative scheme on the side of Africans that is going to exploit Africans? And we should also be asking ourselves, when do we establish our own Starlink on this African continent? When do we send our own satellites in space? We can work with China, we can work with the Russians, they have been to space. We can work with the Indians, they have been to space. When should we establish our own internet whereby they cannot cut us off? Because any day you can be cut off because you are depending on somebody's internet. And these are the critical questions that we should be asking ourselves. We, the children of this generation, we, the people of this generation, who want to see the continent in rapid transformation, who want to see a continent that is rapidly transformed from where it is currently, where our people are suffering and our children and our brothers and sisters are dying in the Mediterranean Ocean, into a future that is bright, and where our children who are in the diaspora now can have hope and can even want to come back on the African continent to stay here and work here, because the place is prosperous for everyone who is living in it. But what do you think? These are my thoughts, and this is what I think about Starlink and how it is taking over not only in the West, but is also taking over the African continent and many people are just celebrating it, are falling into it. And of course, this has to do majorly with our intellectuals. They are the first one to celebrate everything that comes from the West, because they have the money to pay for it and access these conveniences, of life. What do you think that should be, the strategy that Africa should be taking, to rid itself of this mediocrity that is happening on the African continent, where we cannot provide, enough energy for our people? We cannot provide, enough communication systems for our people. We cannot provide even enough food for our people that we import. Ukraine, a country which is under war, is providing food to African countries which are not under war. So this in itself, of course, we see it as a ridiculous approach and a ridiculous way of thinking. We cannot provide enough energy. We cannot provide enough communication. We cannot provide communication systems. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area is there, but it cannot survive without a transport system. And that is what we are, talking about, that we should have these systems. But all these, they require us as Africans to work together. Thank you so much for supporting, Connect Africa and Africa Reimagined. What do you think? Tell me what you think about, these views and about, Starink, as it is taking over the African continent while we are watching, okay? And support the channel, please. Support the channel, like the video and share it with other people. More so, support the channel through PayPal. We have our PayPal account, down here. And we also are happy. We are happy that you are watching, but also we will be more happy if you give us a super chat, so that we can be here more often to serve the continent and to bring consciousness to our people, but also to contribute to the liberation of the African continent. My name is Kwame Gonza, and the channel is called Connect Africa, and also Africa Reimagined. Peace to you and God bless you. Thank you so much.